She thumps a cane and drinks champagne. She's formidable and judgmental, but we can guarantee that she's a quintessential Lady D, but recognizes great potential. What would Danbury do?
Welcome to What Would Danbury Do, your guide to Julia Quinn's Bridgerton series from A to V. Have your handkerchiefs at the ready because this episode we're talking about Francesca and the Earl of Kilmartin. Which Earl? Why choose? It's book 6 in the Bridgerton series, When He Was Wicked. Don't forget you can find us on Twitter and Instagram as @BridgertonPod, and we'd love for you to tweet us using the hashtag WWDD pod. And just a warning, this episode we discuss fertility problems and miscarriages. Yeah, I just double checked. My joke that I pitched as the title of this episode was "Who the fuck is Francesca?" And
which I kind of like.
I still maintain I'm going to use that as a tweet later, so it's okay that it's not the title.
Is it just hi, I'm Adele?
Yep.
I forgot. Okay.
You forgot your name?
I'm Adele.
Sorry.
It's like I don't know who I am. Okay. Hi, I'm Adele.
I'm Kate.
And I'm Rudy.
It's time for When He Was Wicked, written by Julia Quinn and published in 2004 by Avon Books. The dedication to Paul reads, "And for Paul, even though he wanted to call it Love in a Time of Malaria, look at Paul stealing Rudy's jokes 16 years before she'd even thought of them." This is the 6th book in the Bridgerton series and happens simultaneously with both romancing Mr. Bridgerton and to Sir Philip with love so that Francesca can be retconned back into the series. The aforementioned Francesca is a widow and her story is told in 2 parts. Part 1, set in 1820, Francesca is married to the very sweet John, Earl of Kilmartin. Part 2 is set in 1824. 4 years after the death of her husband, and Francesca is very confused about her feelings about John's cousin Michael, the new Earl of Kilmartin, who has just brought his fine self back from India. It's the tone-shifted romance we didn't expect. Let's dive in.
So, in direct comparison to last week, when I expected to like the book, and then it turns out that I actually didn't really like it very much anymore. This was never one of my favorites in the series, but I was really into it.
I went to be like, this is one of my top 5 Bridgertons. That's not saying a lot. There's 8. This is definitely this has always been one of my favorites. I think one of the reasons that people forget about it is that it's so different, in terms of tone.
And Francesca's a non-entity pretty much in all the other books as well.
Which is why it's so surprising.
I think maybe that's why it's a bit different, because we don't have all the other Bridgertons popping up all the time like they have to in sort of the other books. I mean, although Francesca suddenly pops out in places she definitely wasn't in either of the 2 previous books. All of a sudden she's at the ball where Lady Danbury makes her challenge to find Whistledown, and she's in London, during Colin's proposal and everything, and I'm like,
were you?
I find it quite intriguing because in one respect she's completely retconned some of the books in the timeline to make this all sort of not really but kind of work. Yeah. And on a second level, she's kind of used the fact that she's so underwritten Francesca in the part, she's made it part of her, identity. Yeah. That she's the ignored one, but she also likes to keep herself separate from them all. So, I mean, credit to Quinn, because she made it kind of work.
She's so separate from the rest of the family that they never mention her or say hello to her at balls. They just ignore her completely.
Something that's kind of striking about Francesca is that up until now, Francesca is the first heroine that we've got who is part of the peerage and is truly beautiful. None of the other heroines in the Bridgerton series have had both those things.
I've got a question about that. I don't know if my memory is incorrect, but didn't Eloise and Francesca look very similar? And Eloise has a whole thing in the previous book about not knowing she's not that attractive, or not like she's like passable or whatever. So I don't understand.
I mean, Michael says it a couple of times in this book that they all look the same because they all have the same hair and the same smiles, but they make a really big deal about the fact that her eyes are blue.
And as we all know, you can't be beautiful unless you have blue eyes.
Well, yeah. Kate does. We're all doomed.
I do.
But I think it's really, like, it's kind of funny because when I started thinking about it, I was like, Julia Quinn doesn't typically write universally beautiful heroines. Like, it's very rare to come across. And then Francesca has been paired with the only hero that I've read of Julia Quinn's in this series so far, who I honestly believe he fucks. Like, Anthony has this, like, opera singer mistress in The Viscount Who Loved Me. But
they just take tea together and have a nice conversation.
I think so.
I actually think that perhaps Michael was a lot more celibate than we thought he was because of Francesca's magic vagina, which entrapped him even without him getting to interact with it at all.
I wonder if we are understanding the concept of a character who fucks very differently. Because
it is subjective, I guess.
Rudy, educate us. Educate us on characters who fuck. Go on. We're avidly listening to you.
Because I don't just mean having sex. There are other... I'm trying to think how to actually explain it because I am actually quite a prude. So, like...
Is it like the level of dirtiness that he gets to?
And competency.
Oh.
Like, you don't actually have to tell Michael that you want him to pull your hair. He kind of knows. So it's like the literal definition of competency porn.
I mean, and not only that, but he dirty talks. He knows how to dirty talk. Like, that is a skill, my friends. That is a skill.
Potentially one of the reasons that I had this in my head was that I was re-listening to the Joshua Jackson episode of First Aid Kit because it's a classic.
I was just thinking of Casey. We're in the same boat rowing class. Are we? Let's go.
Okay, so there is a moment he
I've probably
says,
highlighted it already.
Yeah, sorry.
I have.
What was it you always asked me? I don't. Tell me something wicked, he said, using his best trying to sound as if he'd just thought of it voice. When, of course, he never forgot anything she said to him. Tell me something wicked, he said again, more slowly this time. That was it. You rather liked me when I was wicked. You were always so curious about my exploits. As I was reading that, all I could think of was Joshua Jackson as Pacey in Dawson's Creek being like, I remember everything. And I was like, yeah, you do. You do.
Yeah. I mean, it's such romantic energy. Like, I could never have you, but it didn't stop me from loving you. I noticed everything about you. I've made a study of you in not a creepy stalker way, in a I just can't help myself, but still be respectful way.
Yeah. So there you go. That's my contribution.
There's a point where she starts getting courted by all these suitors. And they keep comparing those beautiful blue eyes to the sky and the sea. And he's just like, as if the sky could compare, while he's also being very peevish. And it's like my two favorite things at the same time. He's being a complete stud muffin, plus he's being a bit petty. Like, it just, ugh.
I love that part so much because he was like, Francesca's eyes are obviously uncomparable. Like, I don't know what you guys are going on about. Oh yeah, look, it was for all of the angst, there was just something really back to being kind of fun about this book again. Like, it was fun to read, particularly because I mean we'd seen the dynamic switched, because this was essentially Penelope and Colin, right? Because Penelope was yearning for Colin for all of those years.
Michael makes himself the third wheel in a not horrible way. You know, like he's just there.
We have like two tropes then. We have like the widow heroine or like the forbidden love trope, but also the best friends to lovers trope with all of the conflict that's inherent in both of those stuffed into one story. I mean, I get really irritated by too much angsting, but the angsting made a lot of sense, I think, for both of the characters in this one. Like there was so many emotional minefields all wrapped up into their relationship that the amount of time that they spent thinking and trying to talk themselves out of it made a whole lot of sense.
I think that's where Colin's edition, like suddenly becoming very aware and like pulling the strings like a masterful puppeteer, was so great, because not only did it sort of move Michael from this state of permanent angst and loss, I guess, into like one of action, but it was also funny as fuck.
Shall we talk about the fact that our theory about Lady Danbury being the moral center of the universe comes back into play? Because she walks up to Francesca, who, incidentally, also always kind of liked Lady Danbury. And then Lady Danbury tells her that Francesca has a good sense of, good head on her shoulders. And I was like, we've seen this before. I wonder if all of the Bridgertons are also secretly fond of Lady Danbury and have good heads on their shoulders.
Lady Danbury is definitely fond of all of the Bridgerton siblings, because she does make a point of saying at Lady Bridgerton's birthday party, when she's trying to weasel Violet's age out of Francesca, which I quite enjoyed, she does make some comment about how, like, everybody at the party is quite dull, but obviously that doesn't apply to Violet and her children.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
She's not to blame for the overpopulation of dullards in our society. Good God, she bred 8 of you and not an idiot in the lot.
See?
That's a compliment, by the way. I was about to say the same thing, Rudy. Snap!
I think that we haven't touched on the most important piece of information that we get about Lady Danbury during this exchange, and that is that she has a cat. Look, I think this is important that we establish that Lady Danbury is a cat person. We'd never really discussed it before, but I'm not surprised. She is definitely 100% a cat person. She's not a dog person.
This is the one time that I diverge from Lady Danbury. Actually, no, there are other things that her and I don't agree on, but this is definitely something that, yeah.
I mean, I too have a cat, but I wouldn't have called myself a cat person. We have a cat because we don't have a lifestyle for a dog. Sorry, Jemima, if you're listening. We love you too. But I'm like picturing Lady Danbury with like one of those Dr. Evil, like hairless cats that she like sits on her lap on like a silk pillow and like strokes as she, passes judgment on everybody. It's an image I like a lot. I'm a big fan of this.
I'll see. I thought
I don't even pick up on it. So, yeah. I'm not a cat fan either, sadly.
Well, I mean, the point is she had said that if somebody killed her cat, then, she could get away with murder. Then I was like, yeah, you know what? It's fair. It's fine. People feel very strongly about their pets.
It's so funny to kind of think of the continuity of that moment, because she goes from having... I'm taking you at your word that she literally says that she could murder someone.
She loves her cat a lot. And she'd be very unhappy if somebody heard it. And yeah.
Because, okay, so the continuity of that scene is she has that conversation and then she walks across the ballroom, dumping her cane and drinking champagne. She's formidable and judgmental. Anyway, sorry. But so she walks across the ballroom and then she goes and has a conversation with Colin and Penelope, which is also about murder. Because in that conversation, they talk about how Colin could get away with murder if he wanted because he's so charming. No one would ever, like, convict him or whatever. And it's just, like, I don't know.
Okay, spin-off idea. Lady Danbury investigates, seeing like Murder, She Wrote vibes. Lady Danbury investigates murders in like
with a cat sidekick.
With a cat sidekick. Julia Quinn, call us. We can help. We're willing to be very reasonable in our negotiations for this idea.
Yes.
They could even like transport it to like current times, and like she could like stalk up to a door and bang it with her cane and go, "What's up, motherfuckers?" You know, or not. I do declare.
All right. We have not really dived into one of the other major ways that this book differentiates itself from the others, and that is exactly how much hot and dirty sex happens through the whole last half of the book, as opposed to the otherwise, you know, loving and calm, gentle in the pursuit of a strong relationship sex.
Yeah.
I love how verbal he is.
I know.
Like,
I stand a hero that can dirty talk. Like, Jesus, that is an important thing that you can do with your tongue, gentlemen.
Can I also just say, she mentioned she had a healthy sex life with John, and then it comes out that he wasn't into boob play. He basically just ignored her boobs.
This is my What the Featherington moment.
Oh, sorry.
No, I think it's hilarious that you picked up on the same thing.
And then, like, he maybe went down on her twice. Like, are you kidding me? That's not a healthy sex life.
All right, we need to
wait. No. She'd never done cowboy before.
Yeah, exactly. She'd never been on top. He'd never sucked her nipples. And I'm like, what the fuck did you do in bed? Like,
and that wasn't healthy.
Once again,
they were like, the bed was full of passion and laughter. And I'm like, and missionary, apparently.
So Rudy, as continuity queen, is going to remind us all of last episode / last book, where Eloise, who learnt about sex the same way that Francesca did from a maid, is shocked / like surprised about the idea of oral, because the maid that talked to them about sex did not mention that. So I think that when Francesca talks about having a good sex life with John, it is from a place of ignorance.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing, like, was that maid holding out for like a second installment for more information, or
yeah,
like,
because she was getting paid.
Yeah,
you can't.
Like, I'm going to tell you about the basics. You want more? Like, hook me up with them pounds, babies. But I mean, okay, yeah, she thinks it. Yeah, I know, but like, they were supposed to be happy. Like, clearly, John was also super
boring.
Like, we wouldn't even call this vanilla. Like, this is like.
It's unimaginative is what it is.
I can't think of something more vanilla than vanilla. Flour. Tofu. They're having tofu sex, but apparently they were like super madly in love and passionate about each other.
It was marinated tofu.
It wasn't even marinated. It was like just out of the package and still in its weird tofu brine. It was, yeah. It hadn't even been pressed. It was like the worst kind of tofu. Sorry, I eat a lot of tofu. I have thoughts about this.
But like, Michael is one hot tamale, and the sex scenes in this book are the best ones in the series, and they do tell you a lot about character as well. So they're pushing you forward, and you know, like he sort of decide this is all he's going to get. And then he decides this is the way he's going to get her because fact and logic doesn't work. So he's going to confuse her with passion.
He's going to seduce her into it.
He keeps renegotiating with himself, and it's kind of brilliant because then you just get more and more dirty talk, and I love it, and so does she.
And he is asking her every step of the way. So fuck off people who think that consent can't be sexy, because making her say yes to what she wants every step of the way. Whoa. Whoa.
That means Julia Quinn learnt a lot between 2000 and 2004. If you think about it, because Daphne's book came out 4 years prior. So, like, there is some growth there. Yay, Julia. Like,
Oh,
Yeah.
you can tell. Okay, ready? Like, page 5. Rake he might be, but there was no need to torture the woman who'd borne him. Funny how he'd never seen all those other women as a sin. He still didn't. They'd all been willing, of course. You couldn't seduce an unwilling woman. At least, not if you took seduction at the true sense of the word and took care to not confuse it with rape. They actually had to want it, and if they didn't, if Michael sensed even a hint of unease, he turned and walked away. His passions were never so out of control that he couldn't manage a quick and decisive departure. Ha! Page fucking 5.
It's interesting. This is okay. So this is, I'm going to talk a little bit about this, I think, when we do What Would Danbury Do, because it's something that I found in other books that also use the widow trope, which is the comparison between the previous husband or wife and the next one. And I think that most of the time it's unnecessary, and it's also a little bit derivative because, I mean, you can have several relationships and still know which one, and still be happy in those different relationships at different times of your life, but still recognize when the relationship is right for you, for where you are at that time. But both the book I'm going to talk about and What Would Danbury Do and with Francesca, they were like, it was the first relationship that they were in. So I think that the comparison didn't bother me as much as it normally might, because they literally had no other experience. And particularly in Francesca's point of view, where she had to bribe a not particularly forthcoming maid to tell her anything. It makes sense that comparison was there, and that she was like, well, it didn't feel like this with John, or I felt differently with John. I think that made a lot of sense. Like, I think that the comparison normally would irritate me, but with Francesca being the thinker that she is, and also with her only point of comparison being her marriage, then like that internal monologue about how it was different from John and how Michael made her feel differently from John, and how, she went to John's bed, basically uninformed, virgin. So it makes more sense that she's much more sexually adventurous with Michael, because she already knows the basics. So she can open up that part of herself in a way that would have taken her much longer to do with John, to be much more comfortable with John. Whereas, she's going into her relationship with Michael knowing a lot more and being a lot more informed, and also knowing things like what feels good to her. And, so I think that makes a little bit more sense that she's more sexually adventurous with Michael almost from the get-go.
This kind of leads into something that I wanted to talk about, which is that after John dies, Francesca finds out that she's pregnant with his baby, which could potentially be the Earl of Kilmartin. But then she loses the baby. She has a miscarriage. And I have thoughts, and my thoughts are not very well formed yet. I kind of want to see what you guys think first.
I think it made me uncomfortable because it felt like a device where Michael might have talked to her and been a bit more there for her if the miscarriage hadn't have happened. But then with the miscarriage, it was just another thing.
I guess,
it's terrifically sad.
I feel like when this book came out, it was still really rare to find, heroines in particular, but any main characters in a romance novel who had been married previously and sincerely loved their spouse, the one who had died. So that was already her loving John, Francesca loving John, was already a subversion. Also, don't think it was particularly common to come across miscarriages in romance novels. And I might be wrong I might actually just be showing how narrow my reading was in the 2000s, early 2000s, but it felt like Julia Quinn was doing something quite radical in having both of those things as part of the same book. But at the same time, I do somewhat resent that she loses the child of a man that she loved. Because it means that Michael doesn't have to raise a child that's not his own. So there is something in there, but I don't know what to say about it beyond kind of flagging it.
I don't think I've actually read a huge amount of miscarriage scenes in romance either. But what I did like about what she did was there wasn't a lot of pressure from her family. Like usually there'd be a mother-in-law that was devastated and made it about them, or there'd be, I mean, obviously there's the gross lawyer who wants evidence, and there's a very quick scene where the housemaid shows the sheets as evidence that there's been a miscarriage. Like, that's gross. But, like, I like that it wasn't any family pressure. I just felt like it was a bit of a device to get further under Michael's skin when it should have just been about Francesca losing this baby and her connection to her now deceased husband. She says that line to Michael about how he'd kind of be the father. And it feels like it's always driving that kind of conversation. And so it felt like it was much more about Michael than her in some respects. And that's where I felt a bit awkward about it all.
I think miscarriage is one of those things where you can hold two thoughts in your head at the same time. Because on the one hand, I think it is super important to have this kind of representation in romance novels, in novels about women in general. I mean, miscarriages are so common. I remember when I had mine, I think one of the midwives told me that it's like 1 in 3 or even closer to 1 in 2 pregnancies end in miscarriage. It's just that so often they end super early, so you don't always know that you've miscarried. You just think your period's a little bit late, or you have an unusually heavy period. So, it's something that everyone or not everyone, but so many women go through. So to see it represented in your fiction is super important. I think it was radical, and I think it was revolutionary, and I think it was important. I don't know if it was necessary exactly for 2 reasons. First, they would have had to wait before making Michael the Earl anyway. I think it was 3 or 4 months that they wait to make sure that she wasn't pregnant. I'm getting this information particularly from, what was that amazing book? I think it was called A Lady Awakened, where she was married to a horrible man, and the title's going to go to a horrible cousin if she's not pregnant. So she hires somebody to come and sleep with her every day. It was a lady, what's her name? Cecilia Grant.
I was going to say, I've not even read this book, but it sounds like Cecilia Grant.
It was Cecilia Grant's first book. And she basically hires somebody to come and sleep with her every day to get her pregnant so that she can have the chance to continue the work that she was trying to do with her tenants. But the point is, they wait to make sure that she wasn't pregnant. So they could have done that, that stretch of time anyway. And secondly, the miscarriage, it was so late. I think they said something along the lines of 6 months. He'd been waiting 6 months to find out. Unless Francesca was one of those women that's bing, oh, I can feel I'm pregnant from the moment of conception. She would have been really far along. That's not a miscarriage, that's a stillbirth. And there is a lot of trauma to that. And I don't know necessarily that it was necessary. And also the whole standing up and there's blood on her chair. She was wearing 8 million petticoats. There was no way she didn't feel that something was going wrong beforehand. It was just, there was a little bit of cliche built into it too. So I'm of 2 minds. Yes, I think it was important and revolutionary to include it. Do I think it was the best thing to include, or the way that it was included entirely necessary? No, not necessarily.
I mean, it was going to go wrong. Oh, sorry.
I mean, yeah, you do know something was going to go wrong. And the thing about getting rid of the baby as well is that it leaves Francesca completely free to obsess about Michael. it doesn't give her anything else in her life to distract her or to help her move on or to give her another purpose.
It also gives her an impetus to want to remarry. I know that sounds obvious, but this is a woman who was raised by Violet, the perpetual perfect widowed mother, who had her true love and has never even looked sideways at another man since. So it actually...
She must be so, like, horny in a repressed way. Like, she hasn't had sex in 20 years by the time this book has happened.
That is not where I thought this was going to go. But, well, I actually think that the reason your brain went to that sort of area is because Michael took it there. Because Michael flirts with Violet in quite a convincing way, actually.
Divine.
It just, like, yeah, when Michael is flirting with Violet and telling her that he cannot possibly call her anything but Lady Bridgerton because Violet's like, oh, I was like,
too much intimacy to their relationship, and I was like, poof, I felt that. Hello.
I was like, I wouldn't be mad if this was the romance. I'd be all right with that. Which is fascinating because, like, again, Simon does some very sweet things when he meets Lady Bridgerton. He brings her flowers, and it's a lovely moment. Certainly wasn't, like, ready to ship him with her. But I'm prepared to have Violet and Michael run away together, if that's...
You know what? I could have as well. I just was vastly amused by them together, and I just thought they had great chemistry. So, yeah. And she deserves it. Those 8 children and 20 years of celibacy. Jesus.
I did the maths, and they are at roughly 2-year intervals. Like, each of those kids, they're so close together in age that she's like, she gets like a year of not being pregnant in between being pregnant.
Well, not even, because Eloise and Francesca are only a year apart.
Yeah. So
they're, I don't know.
They're Irish twins.
Irish twins. That's what I was working for. And then I was like, is that something that we could say now?
You can't be racist about white people. Like, there's no power to it.
All right. Fair enough. All right. Should we do What the Featherington? Because we're sort of dancing around the conversation at the moment.
I think so.
I'm going to jump in because I think that my What the Featherington has already been touched on. But, like, seriously, never sucked her boobs. Like, what the fuck is going on? Like, okay, I understand that you're not a boob man. But like, you start somewhere. Like, did he just not do foreplay at all ever? Like, was he? Yeah. And also the no cowgirl. Like, they were married for 2 years and happily and in love with each other. So presumably they were, banging it out on the regular. Like, yeah, no cowgirl, no boob play. Just What the Featherington, my friends. What the Featherington.
My What the Featherington is when he first seduces her and he goes to move her to the table, and then in his head says, but not on the table. Even he wasn't that talented. What talent do you need to have to lift a woman onto the table and fuck her?
Adele, maybe he's short.
Sorry. Michael wouldn't be short. He's a dreamboat.
I mean, he's no Benedict, so let's be real.
So true in so many ways.
You're right. Like, yeah. All right. Also, What the Featherington.
So I've been thinking really hard about my What the Featherington, and it's not your typical What the Featherington. It's not me sitting there going like, this is something that's strange. It is more, I want to give a shout out to our mutual friend, Kat from Book Thingo, because she said something to me like last year there's an interesting reading if you think of Michael as Asian, and it actually could work. Like, because I've had that in my head as I was reading, and the more I thought about it, the more, I mean, like, I think he's probably mixed race rather than like, but I could see him as being actually Indian, and it's just a thing that the family doesn't discuss.
They do go on and on about how tanned he is.
Yep. And like, and it kind of explains, or it gives a reason for why of all of the places to run off to, he would run to India and like, yeah.
And thrive there.
And thrive.
Could also explain why he wasn't envious of John too, because
he never expected to be like, it just, so I think, I mean,
that
like,
would mean his mother would be Indian as well.
Yes. Yeah. So it's an interesting reading. I'll admit, I don't think Kat has ever specifically said Indian. She just sort of suggested Asian. So like, definitely open to other countries as theories. But this idea of like, Michael is not white, and it's just something that everyone, in the same way that if you wanted to read Hermione in Harry Potter as black, it will work. There are things about Michael and his life that are coded, and in the same way that J.K. Rowling doesn't deserve cookies just because I've retconned. And like, just because someone has come up with like a fan theory doesn't mean that she gets to like be like, woo, diversity. Yeah, I'm not exactly going to go around and like
a Dev Patel dirty talking.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
To me.
Hold on. Yeah, okay, I'm into this.
With the long lion hair,
yes.
Curly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And broad shoulders. Jeez.
See, like it, and particularly because, like, I think Dev Patel kind of springs to mind because he is in the Charles Dickens.
Yeah, David Copperfield.
That one. And the King Arthur thing.
Sir Gawain and the Green.
Yeah.
I'm glad you guys know. I've just been looking at pictures and being like, I'll watch that when I see it come out.
I was a bit of an Arthurian fangirl when I was a teenager and in my early 20s. In fact, my tattoo is Arthurian. So, yeah, I was excited on 2 levels when that one came through.
The one thing I do want to mention, just to get off the thirst train, is I really love all the interplay between the Bridgerton women in this book, particularly between Eloise, Hyacinth, and Violet, and occasionally Francesca. It's quite quick and fast, and they just hang shit on each other all the time, and it's fabulous.
It's such a nice counterpoint to seeing all of the men hang out together. Yeah. It's really nice to see the women hang out together. Yeah, I agree. That was a really nice part of this book too.
Yeah.
Mm.
It is time for
What Would Danbury Do?
This is where we imagine that a character from another book has written to our favorite terror of the ton to ask for advice. Today, we have a letter from Knox from Nema Simone's Sin and Ink. Dear Lady Danbury, she was my brother's wife, and I've always respected that, made promises to do that, in fact. But he's gone now, and Eden is still here, and so is the way I feel about her, and the sex is off the charts. But I think that there's more to it than that. What should I do? What would you do?
Dirty talk. Clearly, it's been the theme of this episode.
Oh, I don't know if you've read this book, but yeah, this is
I've started reading it. It's great.
Oh, the dirty talk.
Yeah, I've definitely read this book. Yes.
This is definitely our first episode.
Yeah, this is our thirstiest episode yet.
The more we talk about this, the more we reveal our personal kinks. So
I don't think that it's any fucking secret to anybody that forbidden relationships are so deeply my jam. Like, if it is like best friend of a sibling, if it is like my siblings, like widow/widower, like I'm so there for it. Like, yeah.
I like that trope.
I love how like fraught those sorts of things are.
I go across the line. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think Lady Danbury would be all that worried about it. She'd be like, go for it. Because everyone in the ton is pretty much related. At least this time it's not by blood. She's like, it's good. You're keeping it in the family.
No, but seriously, this book is so hot. It's so good. It's really, yeah. Oh, and you know who did this well as well was Wrong to Need You.
Yeah.
Also A Brother's Widow. Yeah. Only in this case, the hero can also cook. So
he makes that toasted cheese sandwich.
Yes. I mean, you gotta love a guy who can make a really good grilled cheese sandwich. It's the simple things.
That's such a... I mean...
Pacey would make a grilled cheese sandwich because he was once a chef.
Oh, that's true. Sorry. There you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that Dev Patel could make a pretty good grilled cheese sandwich too. He'd probably like have some sort of twist to it or something. I can see him making like quite an interesting grilled cheese sandwich.
He could just sandwich me anytime he wanted.
I love Sin and Ing by Naima Simone, and I love Wrong to Need You by Alicia Rai. And so, yeah, I'm starting to think that while I was fairly sure that I was not into widow heroines as a trope, that maybe I am. Like,
just the right one.
Maybe that is... Yeah, I'm having some realizations today. That's cool.
I'm just so glad that we had this book entering the last stretch. Like, we've got 2 more to go. And I know you love Hyacinth, Rudy. But this is my favourite book in the series, bar none.
Oh.
Love it.
Did you always know that?
Every time I read it, I don't feel like it made much of an impact on me the first time I read it, but it's probably my 3rd or 4th time now. I love it more and more every time I read it.
There's a few Julia Quinns that are like really underrated, and they often get forgotten about because there are others that have like much broader appeal and that are more like quintessentially her voice. Whereas this is not what people expect when they think of a Julia Quinn novel. Like, I think that's part of what makes it so special, that it's like, it's that little bit different. Like, yeah. That's all for this episode of What Would Danbury Do? We'll be back in a fortnight with not To Sir Philip with Love, with It's in His Kiss. We'll be back in a fortnight with It's in His Kiss. In the meantime, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram as @BridgertonPod, or send us an email at bridgertonpod@gmail.com. This episode was recorded on the traditional and unceded land of the Gadigal, Wurundjeri and Bunurong people, and edited by audio producer Rudy Brummer on Gadigal country. Thanks for listening, and remember, WWDD.